Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him, but he talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver, pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger, no sweating working for the man, alright.
Hey, race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to the Drafting the Circuits program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about last week in racing, and we've got a special guest lined up today. Before we introduce our guest, with me on the panel, Luis Torres, Richard Youden. Guys, how we doing?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Going pretty good.
All right, so we've got a returning guest, a great friend of the show. I think this is the third, maybe fourth time we've had Mr. Jade Gurss on the show. He is an author as well as does a lot of other things with sponsorship and marketing in the race world. Been in racing his whole life. And Jade, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Frank. It's always great to be with you guys. I always enjoy it.
All right. So last time we had you on the show, we were talking about the book Racer, which is the John Andretti story, which was a fantastic book. And at that time, you indicated to us you had something else in the works, but you wouldn't let on what it was.
Yes.
Of course, now we know that project is what is known as the book Unser Jr. A Checkered Past, which hit the book stands and the websites a couple of weeks ago or about a month ago. And so this is a very popular subject if you think about it, because I'm 54 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a whole generation of people that are close to my age and a bit older who grew up right in that era of the, what us old timers like to call the golden age of kart.
Yes.
So, looking back and dissecting it, but gosh, we loved it back then. And to somebody my age and a little older, Unser Jr. represents everything that was good about kart. I mean, he was one of the major players through that whole era. I mean, the kart series started in 1979. I attended my first race that same year. I was 12. Unser Jr. hit the scene in about 83 or 84. I was 16, 17. So I was right there rooting for this, Unser Jr. as well as his on-track rival, Michael Andretti, through that whole era, which was fantastic. Now, that being said, with this great audience you have of folks like me who are older and have enough money to buy books, how have the sales been for this book so far?
It's been very strong, which is very encouraging. We've really got a lot of very positive coverage, a lot of reviews and interviews, and it's rewarding when you work so hard on something and to have it well received is great. But the publisher has already, we're waiting on the second pressing or printing. So that's always a great sign. So particularly since it's not been out that long, to have a second printing already is great. And word of mouth has been wonderful. So it's very rewarding.
Absolutely. And again, I'll just throw this out there that it's published by Octane Press, who has been really great with putting out books, not only of yours, but of other several, motor racing subjects. But now, speaking of the subject matter, now the last book you did was John Andretti, and he was rather universally liked as a person.
Absolutely.
You've also done the book Beast, which is a very technical book, but for folks into the tech, it was a great read and a very interesting story. And there's a lot of great race stuff in there. And you've done books with Darrell Waltrip and Dale Earnhardt Jr. And I think you told me that Dale told you some great stories that he would not allow you to put in the book.
Yeah.
Both those books are guys that are generally universally liked. But when we talk about Unser Jr. and this particular book, the subject matter is much darker. When we talk about the substance abuse and the damage he did to his career and his family, did you have to adjust your writing style to kind of capture Al's story?
I wouldn't say writing style. It definitely was a book with much more serious topics. As an author, my goal is to disappear, basically. Yeah, I want the book to sound, if you're reading that book, I want you to feel as if Al Jr. is there on your couch with you, telling you these stories. It's in Al's voice, it's Al's stories. My job is primarily as an editor and an organizer to take his stories and his life and create a compelling narrative from that. So it's a little different style each book. Again, just wanting people to be able to hear Al's voice telling you these things. And it's the exact same thing with my Dale Jr. books or Darrell Waltrip or John Andretti. That's really the challenge of an author in those scenarios. This is Al's voice. It's his story and his book.
All right. So now the reaction to the book, I read this book again with great interest, and I've spoken to a lot of my racing friends who had very varied reactions to this book. Now, one way you can walk away from reading this book is to say, man, what an inspirational story. This guy was in the deepest of deep, and he got himself out of it, and he's doing well. You could also walk away from this book and say, my God, what a jackass. Because there are things in there that will make you cringe, especially when you start to put a lot of thought of it, the way he treated his kids or ignored his kids, and the on again, off again with Shelley. So, I mean, what has been the general reaction? And I know it's not a reflection on you, but perhaps a reflection on him.
I think it's been primarily positive. I think people appreciate his bravery in the sense that from the very first time he and I spoke about this book, he said, I want to be honest. I want to tell my story because I think people can learn from my mistakes, the terrible things that he has gone through in his life. And so it was very important to him from the very first discussion was that he be able to be open and honest and share the truth, even when he doesn't look very good. I have no problem admitting that some of my books, made these drivers look heroic at times. And while Al was a hero to some behind the wheel, his life has taken a lot of different turns. And so it was very important that this be about the very human person behind, the facade that won 2 Indy 500s, 2 IndyCar championships, IROC titles, all that. And it was very important for him to explain why certain things happened and really try to give the full story, while at the same time being committed to not trying to throw others under the bus or to, write a quote tell-all book that was, definitely trying to blame others or any of that. It was definitely Al sharing his truth and the consequences. And you're right, he has survived and is definitely, making a strong comeback. He's recently married. He's really getting his life back together. So that was what we discussed the very first time we met to talk about the book.
Yeah.
Sorry, quick quick question, Frank. Sorry to interrupt that. In a way, when you're writing this sort of a book from a slightly different angle from the others you've written, is it almost easier in a way because you're not trying to create this image, this sort of fanciful image, this sort of like hero image? You're almost sort of being a bit more open and realistic about it.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And again, credit to him because it was his intent to do so. So my challenge is taking that element, the human element, and again, putting it in a format that's compelling and not entertaining necessarily at all times, but a very compelling read. So it definitely had emotional elements that I had not had written previously.
Yeah, I guess you're not worried about upsetting him because that's the point of, I guess, a no holds barred sort of book.
Exactly. And I will say that some of his friends or family members were very concerned while we were writing the book. I think they might have imagined the worst of the worst and were concerned for him. But I think now that the family and everyone has been able to read it, I think it's, it makes a lot of sense of why he would want to share this story or why he would want to be so open and honest.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that because that was going to be one of my questions here is have you had any pushback from the family? Because there are portions of the book. Now to Al's credit, he takes responsibility for a heck of a lot of his stuff. But there are portions of that book where he really paints Shelley Unser in a not so good of a light. He's the point about her. I think he even says something like, I was smoking marijuana, which never hurt anybody, but she was doing cocaine and spending all my money and buying furniture and trading the furniture and running through the fortress. So she's not painted in a particularly good light. And I was wondering if there was any pushback from her family or from the children at all, but no.
If there has been, I'm not aware of it, but that was definitely the biggest dilemma, is that this is the mother of his children, and sadly Shelley passed away a few years ago, and so is not here to defend herself or to answer. So we try to be very open or very even keeled about details about Shelley that obviously not all of those are pretty, but Al felt that because the two of them were such a force together. I mean, he describes the fact that once they started dating, they were never apart at all until their sort of stormy divorce in 1999. So we would talk about that quite a lot. And it was definitely something that we were very conscious of, painting a portrait that, that was very accurate, not always complimentary of Shelley, but it is what happened. And he was very committed to being truthful. So we really worked through that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Again, like I said, he takes responsibility for everything. But in reading the book, and we all know that substance abuse and addiction is a very, very real disease, and it affects a lot of people. But if you look at Al's life, I mean, all the triggers were there. The divorce at a young age, death of a sibling. Do you want to live with mom or do you want to live with dad? Fame at a young age, high income at a young age. I mean, all the triggers were there. And I guess he was just not able to resist. I mean, did he mention any of the triggers at all? I mean, they're all mentioned in the book, but he never says this is why.
Yeah, it sort of lays out in the book like it did in his life. Some of these things at the time he was not aware of their impact upon him, that it's only later that he realized that he lost his sister when he was 19 years old. And at the time, rather than deal with the grief and the death, he basically self-medicated to try to escape it. And it was only later, when he started really dealing with the problems in his life, that he realized, wow, that really was a huge trigger early in his life, that by avoiding it really became a very deep issue with him. You mentioned the family. His parents were divorced at a young age, and basically he ping-ponged back and forth between living with his mom and living with his dad. And again, only later does he realize how that had an impact on him, him as a very young man, or young kid, not even a teenager yet. So in the book, if you're reading along with it, those things become prevalent only later in retrospect. And I think that's where the final section of the book is very powerful, in that those pieces finally start to come together for him, as well as the reader. A lot of questions that you may have as a reader begin to be explained or to develop as he grows more mature and begins to really assess his life.
All right. Now, Louise, you have a question, I see.
Yeah. Going back to the whole thing about two of them, how tough was it for him to kind of look back at that time period in 1999? Because, of course, not just dealing with the divorce, but also just the final year of his car career, when Penske was in the downward spiral per se, and of course his temporary teammate Gonzalo Rodriguez was killed in that ordeal.
Yeah.
How tough was it just kind of for him to talk about his final year in kart and with Penske as a whole?
Yeah, I tell you, that segment of the book was very hard for both of us, actually. At that time, I was with Mercedes-Benz, so I was involved with Gonzalo's death, and then a few weeks later with Greg Moore's death. So he and I share that sort of shared grief for those drivers. But there were times when we would literally have to stop the interview. Al would get very emotional talking about those things in particular. When he began talking about Shelley falling ill late in her life and then passing, that really took a lot to get through for him. So it was very emotional, but I get the sense that it was very cathartic for him to finally tell these stories, to finally open up. I don't think he had told these stories to many people at all. And I think in a therapeutic way, it was a chance for him to sort of unburden himself with some of those. And so it was really very emotional through several sections of the book, but those in particular, particularly 99 that you mentioned, that was a very, very rough year for him.
For sure. And the follow-up was that time period of the 1980s. I think what some people forget is that he was kind of a big deal because he was like very, very young in a time period where sometimes you may have to lie about your age to enter a car, like with Jose Garza did.
Yes.
And how was that at that time period? Because I think if I recall, you had to be 21 to compete. And on top of that, when he slowly became popular, he was featuring on a lot of stuff like his own video game, which was not common at that time period.
Yeah, you're dead on. It's really intriguing because unlike today, where drivers, basically get to the top at very young ages, Al and Michael Andretti were really the exceptions. You mentioned Jose Garza. It's a great story about how he got to drive in the Indy 500. He was too young, but he had, quote, a Mexican racing license that said he was 22. And so that's how he was able to enter the Indy 500. But it is fascinating. And to Al, because he grew up in that family, he didn't think anything of it that he was so much younger. It was just natural. He grew up in a family that raced for a living, and that's what he did. And so it's very fascinating to hear him describe sort of his rapid rise, straight to IndyCar with great rapidity and great success. So it was fascinating as well. That even as he became, quote, the old veteran, he was still chronologically a very young man. He and Michael were really, two of a kind in that era as far as being young and successful.
Yeah, speaking of Michael, he does mention Michael quite a bit in the book. Here and there, they always had kind of a decent relationship, but they weren't really friends. But they would talk, and as true, they were going on vacation together. I always thought the most interesting thing about Michael and Al is that I used to always say Unser Jr. is the only person that will call Michael Andretti Mikey. And Michael lets him get away with it. Michael doesn't. He doesn't bat an eye. But if you or I were to say, "Hey, Mikey," you'd get the stink eye out of him. But I did find it interesting that the man that Al Jr. would most often go to for advice at the racetrack after his dad was Mario. He had a great respect for Mario and Mario's opinion on what he should do career-wise or what he should do setup-wise or what he should do in the race really held a lot of weight for him. And I found that to be quite interesting.
Yeah, I did as well, because from the outside, you always thought of the families as rivals, whereas, in reality, Al Jr. just really worshiped Mario. And it's discussed in the book that at a very young age, Mario connected Michael and Al for things like contract negotiations. If Al got a raise in his contract, that meant pretty much Michael was going to get a raise on his next contract. And I think Mario recognized that the two of them could work together to help each of them, earn a lot more money over their careers. So I found that very fascinating. Mario was definitely an idol of Al Jr.'s, and then Michael was his most respected competitor. Even late in the book, Michael had a very meaningful discussion with Al that really helped Al get on the right track, and I find that a very touching moment in the book. So,
that was one of my favorite moments of the book as well. Yeah,
really was powerful. So, although
the way you put it, it was he says, and an old friend came to me and said, I don't want to ruin the book for anybody. Said this and this. Yeah. And then at the end it says that person was Michael Andretti.
Yeah,
I said, wow.
Yeah, and that's how Al told me the story. Is that I had this friend that came up to me and he said this, and you're right. And then at the end of the interview, he said, "Oh, my friend was Michael Andretti." And so I knew that had to go in the book just as he had, just as he had told the story. So yeah, very powerful moment.
Yeah, it was perfect. It was perfect. Yeah. So, but let's talk about this. I don't want folks to think this whole book is about Al's addictions, because there are great sequences in this book of the racing.
Yes.
And Al talks quite a bit about, his early years in karts and his, struggles with the Gallmer and his high hopes for the Gallmer chassis. And then when they pull the plug on that and go into Penske. And I think my favorite story in the book is this Larry Nuber story.
Yes.
I was laughing out loud when I read that. And I will spoil this part of the book for you folks listening. But essentially, ESPN is covering the kart races, and they've come up with this new thing where they they ask a particular driver whether or not they can, hey, do you mind if we kind of break into your radio transmission during a caution and just chat with you? You could chat on the air. And Al says, yeah, sure, no problem. So the race begins. Al's got no radio. His radio is not working at all. He cannot communicate with his crew. The race goes like 178 laps or something crazy before there's a caution, right? And he's, doing a hand signal to communicate with his crew. And then suddenly when they get under caution on the radio, says, hey, Al, Larry Newber, ESPN. And he goes, what? You can hear me? He says, take your radio and give it to my crew now. and then, of course, Larry Newber doesn't. He doesn't. And then the next time Larry Newber comes on, he gets an earful of profanities from little Al. I was like,
Yes.
that story had me laughing. But, but at the same time, to Larry Newber's point, they didn't want to give the appearance that they were helping out a certain team by giving them the ESPN radio. But man, great little story in there, and racing is full of great little stories here and there.
Yeah, and again, I come at these books as a fan as well. So these are the stories that I love to hear. And as a race fan, I had never really heard Al go into deep description of when he and Mo crashed, and the very famous moment where Al claps and gives Mo a thumbs up. That wasn't quite as simple as what it looked like to the naked eye, and Al was very good about sharing that. He was great about sharing just the incredible emotions after he won his first Indy 500 in 1992, how it's just so overwhelming. And I just found him so entertaining in that he shared legitimate emotions about what he was going through. And then the element that I don't think had ever been described in depth was in 1995, when Team Penske famously failed to qualify with either of their cars. And that takes up 2 chapters in the book. And so it was fascinating that he would share what was a very difficult time for him and Emerson Fittipaldi and the whole Penske crew. Again, that was a main story from 95 that I don't think has been told in that depth ever before.
No, I understood a whole lot more about it after reading it. And the funny thing that I noticed about the book, and I'm just going to throw this, that has to do with the layout of the book, the two sections where there's the sections of photos,
yes,
are like right in the middle of the Indy 500 stories. The first one is the win, and then the second set of pictures is right in the middle of the non-qualifying 95. I don't know if that was by design or not, but it's like you're really engrossed in this. Oh, this is interesting. And like, pictures, but
yes. Yeah, that some of that is literally the physical layout of the book. You have the photos are color pages versus it's a different paper for the text. So I must admit I was not aware that those fell there in those positions, but
some I noticed because I'm weird.
Interesting.
I noticed weird stuff.
No, that's all right. Now I'm going to have to go back and think, man, they should have moved those, but too late now.
Well, no, it gets you right back to reading because let me.
Yes.
Oh, nice pictures. Yeah, but let me because I got to see what happens next. It stops you from putting the book down.
Yeah.
I gotta see what happens next. So
yes, well that's always the goal.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because it's not really expressly stated in the book towards the end. Do you believe that Al has kind of patched his relations with his children? He does mention that after Shelley passed in 2018, he went back to Albuquerque to be with his children because they needed him. But one thing, one thing I've noticed is Al Unser Jr, right? Who was when he was running the Infinity Pro Series for a short time, I was just making my way as a journalist, but he was always good for an interview. He would always have. Actually, Shelley would set them up. So I kind of follow him every now and again. Now his life right now is not glamorous. He sells insurance, and he goes on a run every morning, and he puts that on a Facebook Live, him running, which is okay, appreciate it. But if anybody posts on his social media like a picture of like him really young with his dad, says, hey Al, is this you? He'll just say yes, and then he won't delete it, but he'll turn commenting off.
Yeah.
If anybody posts a picture of Unser Jr. on his timeline, he'll turn the commenting off, which I don't know if he just doesn't want to be reminded or if he wants to keep it private. But I'm just wondering if that relationship with the children has been patched, because it's stated very early in the book that and it's 2012 when he's having his lowest of lows, and he says, "My children hate me."
Yeah. Honestly, it was an area that I didn't delve into deeply. It's clearly something that is very very powerful for Al. The impression I get is that his relationships are better with them since Shelley's passing. I think Al has made a big attempt to improve that. But beyond that, I don't know. I couldn't tell you a current status of that, but I know it was something that pained him, that he wanted to make an effort to be better about as a father. So
certainly, I didn't know if he had spoken about it, because again, like I said, it's not expressly stated in the book, and I really hope it has, because that sometimes that hurt from a family member can be really deep, worse than coming from a friend. So I really wish Al the best in mending those relationships, particularly since Shelley's not around anymore, and they only have each other.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, Richard, you've been quiet over there, which is my go-to phrase. So, Richard, do you have any questions for Jade about the book or anything?
Come back to me. I've been thinking here, and come back to me on that one.
Okay, well, I'm just looking over my notes, and the one thing that struck me in this book is that Al seems to be well recovered. It seems to be, but again, he's had a couple of relapses in the past, and but it really seemed like it's. I mean, he's what, 60 now?
Almost, yeah.
Pretty close. If I'm 54, he's 5 years older than me, so he's yeah. But the one thing I find interesting is that he's unapologetic about his use of marijuana. And now I don't smoke marijuana, right? But I have friends that do, and I don't think that it's a horrible thing. I don't think any less of my friends. It's just not my thing. And no, it's becoming legal here, there, and everywhere. But he speaks about smoking marijuana as early as the 5th grade. And again, I mentioned it earlier. You said, "Oh, marijuana never hurt anybody." We know that it's technically a medicine and whatnot, but I just found it interesting that it's the cocaine and the alcohol, but the marijuana is like, oh yeah, and there was that. But that's essentially what knocked him out of the Penske drive.
Yeah,
and knocked him out of the contract with Tony George, which I found that to be highly interesting. Tony George was paying his salary, and then after the fact, he says, "Yeah, Al, I was never going to pay you that money to begin with."
Yeah. It's his relationship with Tony is very complex, and it sounds like they have good times and bad times. But yeah, he is very quick to admit that this disorder or disease, whatever you want to call it, that he has dealing with substances, it doesn't just go away. It's not like you get a cold and it goes away. So he admits to that it's always going to be somewhat of a challenge. And at the end of the book, I think he talks about he really feels that he's on a great track going forward now, that there are things that have changed in his life that have made a huge difference, but that it's an issue that he will have to deal with the rest of his life. And hopefully he remains getting stronger and better. And I think he's doing very well now. He just got married. He's working in racing again and helping a lot of younger drivers, which he really loves doing. And, he's able to give back to the sport. So, I don't pretend to have a crystal ball, but in the writing of the book, I feel like he has been on a very good track, onwards and upwards. And I think the book played a part in that as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes just getting everything off your chest and out there can help you move forward. So, and again, the fact that he's helping younger drivers is wonderful because he has so much to give.
Absolutely.
He has so much knowledge, so much experience. He was doing some great work with Harding, with Colton Herta before. He had another setback. So it is great to see him involved back in the sport. I mean, it was great to see him and Willie T. Ribbs driving together in the SVRA.
Oh yeah.
So now Richard, I see that you do have a question now. So
no, I've got one. So Jade, a number of the books you've written are on drivers that, should we say, were part of a racing dynasty, whichever one you want to call it. And with no disrespect to any of them, they probably haven't been the most successful member of that family in terms of their results and their racing performances in many instances. Do you ever get, how do they sort of see themselves, or do you ever get a sort of a insight into how they saw themselves in the hierarchy of the family?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, because I've been really lucky in that I've been able to work with a lot of families, or a lot of drivers that are part of a multi-generational racing family. Dale Jr. was fascinating in that as a young man, he felt immense pressure to live up to his father. And it caused him a lot of stress and angst as a young man. As he matured, I think that got better. Then prior to Al Jr., I worked with John Andretti, who was the nephew of Mario. And John jokes that for a long time, he thought his first name was Other. It's the Other Andretti.
That is funny.
But he clearly speaks only highly of his uncle and his cousin. And he had so much pride in that last name. And his book, he was very much about love and family. And so he had a slightly different angle or a different take than, say, Dale Jr. Now with Al Jr., again, that was part of some of the questioning I was going to have for him. And he dealt with it very quickly. That's early in the book, where he did an interview with a journalist when he was just getting started in sprint cars. And the journalist asked him about, do you feel pressure to live up to your dad, your namesake? And he said, honestly, it had never hit him. He had never thought about that until that moment. And that he said, no, he didn't feel that. And his dad gave him these great points of advice that he didn't care what he did as long as he tried his best and that he was happy. And I really do get the sense that Al didn't feel pressure to live up to his dad. And he makes a joke that if I could be half of my dad, then I would be a very proud man. And he says, oh, of course, he's won Indy 4 times and I've won it twice. So in that aspect, I'm I'm exactly half the man my dad was. So I found that very interesting, and it was a topic that he and I talked about very early in our discussions about the book. So those are three drivers that I've worked with that each have a slightly different view of their famous last name and what that meant on them as pressure to live up to that last name. So I found it fascinating. And again, that's the luck of my career that I've been able to work with, like I say, a number of families that have that.
Yeah. No,
right,
interesting. Go on. Sorry.
So can we ask you what's next for you, Jade? You got something else on the books?
To be very honest, I finished the Andretti book, which of course with John's passing was incredibly emotional and difficult. And very soon after that, it turns out the Andretti family attorney is also Al Jr.'s attorney. And he reached out to me and he says, Al wants to do a book. Would you agree to do it? And I couldn't say yes fast enough, but I essentially turned in the Andretti book and began immediately with Al Jr. And so right now I'm finishing up 2+ years of just constant writing, and I'm very proud of how they both turned out, but I need a little break. I need a little breather. I've got a few ideas sort of percolating in the back of my mind, but I'm looking at maybe doing some broadcast work behind the scenes, kind of cleanse the palate, I guess, if you will, and do some other things for a short time, and then certainly get back to the writing, just kind of waiting for the project to present itself and get back into it. So no, I have nothing working, but that doesn't mean that's forever.
That interestingly enough, one of the questions I have here that I hadn't asked yet was the John Andretti book, which was so well done by you, the impetus for Al coming to you, and you just answered that for me. So wonderful.
Yeah.
Now I do want to ask you this, because one of the other hats you wore for a while was to be PR rep for the Road to Indy series.
Yeah.
And now we're moving Indy Lights from the ownership of Anderson Consulting to Penske Entertainment. And I just wonder what your thoughts on that. Do you think that's a good move, bad move, or?
I must admit I don't know all the details, but it's always a positive when Roger Penske really commits to something. And it's not like Dan Anderson and the Road to Indy folks, it's not like they're going away. They've actually created a new entry-level program that will lead to the F2000 and then the Pro 2000. So they will be very much a part of that, the whole ladder, the Road to Indy. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of in my career. I can't tell you how I feel so proud to see drivers like Pato O'Ward or Colton Herta or all these young drivers coming up through the ranks that I feel like, man, I was there in their early days, and I'm like a proud father with all of those drivers that have come through the ranks. It's really a great feeling to see them succeed and to see them go to the top and to really do a great job. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's a point of great pride to me.
Oh yeah, and I mean I think this particular past season, 2021, we saw a real changing of the guard there when you got guys like Colton, Pato, and Alex Palou, who didn't come out of the Road to Indy. But you got these young guys fighting at the top. When the older guys are, I don't want to say struggling to keep up, but it's like, IndyCar has been poised for a changing of the guard for a while. And now we're seeing it. And I think it's exciting to see it right before our eyes. And, guys like Colton and Pato are so exciting to watch, particularly Pato. Pato, That guy's got the fastest hands I've seen since
Yeah.
Montoya was young, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And when I first came aboard with Mazda, one of the guys that worked with us said immediately, he says, let's watch this Pato Award kid. At that time, Pato was 15 and had just started in what was then called Pro Mazda. So I give credit to my buddy for recognizing it early, but oh my gosh, he is just such a wonderful kid and so pleasurable to be around and to watch mature. Yeah, I'm like a proud older brother or proud parent when I see Pato and people like Oliver Askew succeed in what they're doing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, all right. So we got a few minutes left. Now, Jay, did you get a chance to watch the Formula One race?
I certainly did. I was on the edge of my couch.
Yeah.
It's getting to the point where you better have your popcorn popped early in the morning because there's going to be drama from start to finish. So, I think it's brilliant to see what a season, how great it is and how that has energized people. Here in the US, they say that, the Netflix show has a huge impact, which I agree with. But the fact that this season has just been amazing start to finish, I think has really kicked it into, sort of hyperdrive or whatever you want to call it. I couldn't be more thrilled with how the season has been. And yeah, as a fan, I'm eating it up day in and day out. That's for sure.
All right. So now, Richard, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us your report from the race before we sign off tonight. So it's all you. You got about a couple of minutes.
Wow, where do we start? What a race we had this weekend. Brazil, as we've always sort of pointed out, it's these old style tracks, these old classic tracks that tend to produce the better races, and we certainly saw that again this weekend. Going into the weekend, the big news I think was that Lewis Hamilton was going to take a engine penalty going to the race. So wherever he finished the sprint qualifying race on Saturday would be where he would start 5 places back from there. They were, with this new engine, immensely fast in Hamilton's car. 3 to 4 tenths of a second up on Verstappen on a pretty regular basis in every session, including the qualifying session on the Friday afternoon, which gave Hamilton pole going into the sprint race for Saturday afternoon. But that's when the whole weekend took a little bit of a turn for the worse from Mercedes' standpoint. Hamilton's car failed its post-race inspection due to the DRS flap on the rear wing opening too much and being outside of regulations. And that's a pretty clear-cut penalty. There's not much you can do about that. I think Mercedes tried to question damage to the rear wing. And what didn't really help the situation was that Max Verstappen decided to, in parc ferme, which is a big no-no, grab hold of the rear wing of the Mercedes and give it a good old shake to see how much it moved, which wasn't the smartest thing to do for Max, and did result in a $50,000 fine, or €50,000 fine. And I think Mercedes tried to blame the damage on the rear wing on that, but that obviously wasn't the case, and it resulted in Hamilton starting the sprint qualifying in 20th position, rather than the pole, which arguably he deserved to start. So we go into the sprint qualifying race on the Saturday afternoon, and of course, all eyes are on Hamilton to see how he can fight back from starting 20th on the grid there, and in a third of the race distance, so 24 laps, I think it was. He drove fantastically, managed to get up to P5 at the end there, with Bottas winning and Max finishing second. So 3 points for Valtteri in the championship there, two for Max, and I think Carlos Sainz picked up the final point from the sprint race format there. So going into the race proper, if you like, Valtteri was on pole with Verstappen in second, and Hamilton got demoted down to 10th. And everyone's saying, where can Hamilton finish after starting in 10th? And good grief! I mean, people question Hamilton's overtaking abilities in the past, and I've been critical of him at times, but good grief, that was a phenomenal drive. On a challenging circuit, an old school circuit, he executed a flawless race. As did Max. I don't think you can criticize Max. He fundamentally he wasn't fast enough, and that was purely down to the new engine that Mercedes have in the back of the car. The differential between a new engine and an old engine for Mercedes is far higher than for Red Bull. Red Bull will only change an engine from a reliability standpoint. Mercedes are in a position where they can change their engine from a performance standpoint. And maybe this is something the FIA need to look at into the future, because they could be in a position where these new engines are worth, as we saw in Brazil, 3 to 4 tenths of a second a lap, which
I was going to say that you just slap a new engine every week. Take a 5 place penalty. Take 5 place penalty and blow everybody else off a track.
Yeah, so they may have to be a little bit careful with that. Now, thankfully, we don't have any circuits between now and the end of the season that I would consider have the same overtaking opportunities as Interlagos. Although Abu Dhabi, they have changed a couple of the corners there. First one leading onto the first back straight, and the second one exiting the second back straight. So maybe it could be the move to do for Mercedes to give them a more powerful engine. Who knows? So that's going to create an interesting dynamic going into the final few races of the season there. But and I've, you guys here, we've talked about this, number of times this season. This 2021 is going to go down in the annals of Formula One as a classic season. You have two, I'm not going to say the greatest driver, generational drivers, two greatest drivers of their current generation at the limit, pushing each other week in, week out to make each other better. And we're just sat here on our sofa every weekend, loving every minute of it. The level that these two guys are driving at is phenomenal, and we are truly privileged to be able to watch it. And we, even saw a little bit of controversy with a little bit of Max and Lewis getting the elbows out there. Lewis tried to get past Max with probably about 20 laps to go, and Max sort of ran wide and pushed Lewis off into turn 4, and the stewards said there was nothing wrong with it, and then Lewis did eventually get past him, and Lewis actually in the post-race conferences will be, I'll probably do exactly the same thing. It was hard, clean racing. They didn't touch, bit of a grey area probably, but one of the things that I would take out of it, and I've seen a lot of the content on social media and the like about comparing what Max did to Lewis as to what Lewis did to Max at Silverstone. And I think the big difference here is that what Max did to Lewis was on the exit of the corner, where the car dynamics are a lot different to trying to get into the apex of the corner, as you saw at Silverstone at Copse, where Hamilton dived at the inside, missed the apex, and Max was just turning in on him, and we discussed that one at the time. But this one, Max had to defend. Max isn't just going to sit there to his World Championship rival and go, yeah, after you, through you go there, enjoy the rest of your race. He was going to, take the inside line and brake late. It's naturally he's going to run wide, and Lewis was, level with him. And yeah, they both ran wide. But it wasn't like Max forced Lewis off the corner at the apex of the corner. This was on the exit. And I think, personally, I think there's a lot more leeway for having that sort of maneuver where you push your elbows out on an exit to a corner as compared to the apex of the corner. The apex of the corner, that's when things can go really badly wrong, as we saw in Silverstone. Here, on an exit of the corner, I think you can, you're on the apex, what the other guy's going to do. Lewis knew that Max was going to run wide and, took avoiding action. They didn't touch. They didn't really come close to touching. It was just it's just good, semi-clean racing between two fantastic drivers. So, I didn't have too much of a problem with there not being a penalty there, because of the, as I say, where it happened throughout the corner there in particular. And there's plenty of run-off area at the exit. They knew that. And I didn't have too much of an issue with that. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that move.
Oh, I thought it was fine. I mean, you got all that runoff area. Yeah.
I mean, the
Yeah.
best way to all of this would have been prevented is if you added grass and gravel, but we're not in that era anymore.
No, we're not. All right. So we've got a week off, and then we've got a swing through the Middle East. We got Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and then Abu Dhabi, and then we're done. So
we're done.
You guys want to pick a winner for Qatar? I'll start with you, Jade.
Boy, I tell you, the way that Mercedes was running and the way Lewis drove, boy, how can you choose against him? As a fan, I'm kind of leaning Max, but Lewis was just magnificent, and it seems that nothing will stop him at the moment.
All right, now, Louise, who do you like?
I like Casey Stoner's chance. Oh wait, this is Formula One in Qatar, not MotoGP. Anyways,
don't pick Pierre Gasly again.
He finishes the points though, but all right,
he did.
I'll give him that, but I probably would have been better off with Carlos Sainz, but no, let's go with Bottas here.
Okay, now Richard, that leaves you Max.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I guess I'll take him if I have to.
Okay, so that leaves me who?
You have Perez, you have Sainz.
Perez, yeah, I don't know. So I'll take Perez, and we'll see how that works out. So, all right, so we are just about up at the end of our hour. But before we go, Jade, I want to thank you very much, and I want to give you 2 minutes to plug yourself on social media. Tell us where we can find you, where we can buy your books, and where we can just keep up with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on. Social media wise, I'm most active on Twitter. That's at Jade Gurss. You can find me there. My books are sold anywhere books are sold. So, take all you can eat. We'll make more. And if you'd like to order it direct from the publisher, Octane Press is the publisher. I think they've got some specials coming up. You may be able to save a few bucks. I don't have the specifics right here, but that's another option if you'd like to order it online.
Yeah, I did see they've got like a bundle or two where you can buy like your book along with John Oriovitz's book, The Indy Split. You could buy the Unser Jr. and the Indy Split book for like a nice little package deal for two of them, which make a great Christmas gift. Great Christmas gift for that race lover on your Christmas list. And if you're listening to this show, the race lover is you. So buy yourself a Christmas gift. All right. So, but we are out of time. So I want to thank you, Jade, so much for coming on. You are always a wonderful guest. And I can't wait to see what you have next after you take your little breather. And we'll get you back on again. I want to thank you, Louise and Richard. You guys are always wonderful. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and YouTube, all those people that carry us. But most of all, I want to thank you folks that listen to us every week. But until next week, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.